Okay, awesome. Welcome to our Finance Friday weekly course. My name is Jerry. I'm the owner, founder, CEO of a company called Wealth Dynamics. And every Friday, we come to you with a live course on finances, on wealth. And this week is no different. Now, we're going to dive into one of my very favorite things to talk about, which is the blueprint to financial freedom. This is a system that I've spent the last 10 years of my life developing, applying with myself, applying with clients. And really what it is it's a detailed step-by-step pathway that if followed, it produces financial independence in a way that's systematic and is duplicatable. Every time it's going to do the same thing. And so this took a lot of time for me to research, study, organize, develop, do my own trial and error on, find out this is a bad idea, these are good ideas, get rid of the bad ones, keep the good ones, and really consolidate this into a workable plan that I believe anyone can follow. And so tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what this is in detail, but I really want to go over each step. Okay. Because with finances, because it's math, the numbers have to go in the right spot in an equation. We can't just be randomly shoving in whatever numbers we want to shove in and putting them in whatever order we want to put them in. We have to look at what's the end result of the equation, right? Just like in algebra, what are we trying to solve for? Based on what we're trying to solve for, what numbers need to be involved and where do they need to go in order for the equation to be right? And anything other than that is incorrect. Okay. So this isn't science where we're looking at, hypotheses and we have these ideas, but we can't really prove them and it's always evolving. No, this is math. Money is math. Math is black and white. There's either right or there's wrong. Okay. And that was something that I had to really deal with and learn growing up because I was so used to having subjective answers in life. Money is one of the only areas out there where you can't have subjective answers. Subjective means my opinion is valid, my own personal reality is valid, and I can apply that outwardly and still get on. Okay. Math doesn't work that way. Okay. Math doesn't care what I think. Math doesn't care what my opinions are. Math doesn't care what my feelings are. Math doesn't care what my unique creative ideas are. At the end of the day, what math cares about is, did we solve the equation? And if we didn't, it's not going to work. Right. So I'm going to dive into this tonight, the blueprint to financial freedom. And as I'm going through this, I really want to, go over with you a couple of things I cover every week. So first off is, what's your purpose for watching this? Okay. What's the reason why you're here? Because it's got to be something, right? There's got to be a reason why on a Friday night at 10 p.m. you're watching this live stream. Okay. There's got to be a reason, even if you're watching the replay that you're watching this, you could be watching anything in the world that you want to. You picked this. Why? Okay. I want you to have that answer. I don't know that answer for you. If you're working with us as a client or you want to, we can help you find that answer. But I want you to think about, how am I going to apply this information? And at least that be your answer for tonight. So you've got good reason to watch this. Number two, okay. Be a producer, not a consumer. Producers contribute. Producers are positive. Producers focus on adding. Consumers, they take, right? So consumers, they're going to take, whether that means, I'm on all the way on the scale of being negative and critical, or maybe I'm more of a moderate consumer where I'm not going to be negative and critical. I'm just not going to say anything. I'm not going to, be engaged. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm not going to think about how to apply the information. That's another form of consumption, right? I've got to give in order to get. That's produce more than consume. So be a producer. And then lastly, if you have questions, make sure you drop those in the comments. Finance comes down to math and vocabulary. Okay. So if I go over something that's math that doesn't make sense, we can sketch it out on the whiteboard. If I give you vocabulary or words that don't make sense, make sure you ask about those as well so that I can answer them and make sure we clear them up for you. And very lastly, we will go live as always. So if you're on Zoom, we're going to go live and actually talk so we can go on air. What I want you thinking about with your questions is, if you're a client, what questions, what challenges, what obstacles are you facing, right? The big three questions are, what blueprint step did I just finish? Which one am I on now? And which one's next? And so I want you to think with that and then think about, okay, what are my questions or struggles or obstacles when it pertains to this? If you're not a client, then I want you to ask questions about, what is this? How does this work? Right? Why would I follow this as opposed to something else? Why is this the right method? And we'll be able to answer those. And then obviously we're going to go over a lot. So if there's things you'd like to learn more about, drop those in the comments as well. And we'll make sure we answer those towards the end. Okay. Now I want to preface this with a quick story. Okay. And some of you guys might be able to relate to this. When I was growing up, I lived in a little town called Big Lake, Alaska. Okay. Some of you guys are familiar with Big Lake. Some of you may even live there. Big Lake, Alaska, when I was living there, was about 5,000 people, maybe 5,000, maybe less. And in that town, right, everyone knows everybody. It was tiny. We had one grocery store. It wasn't very big. We had a library. We had a school. The school had, in my graduating class, 60 kids. And it was one of those towns where you had like the lake where all the rich people lived, right? So everyone from Anchorage, which was the big city about an hour away, they had their cabin on the lake. Okay. Everyone always went out to the cabin on the lake. I did not have a cabin on the lake. I lived in Big Lake, right? So those that lived in Big Lake didn't usually get to have a cabin on the lake. They usually had a shack in the woods, okay, to put it lightly, right? So if you lived in Anchorage, you got to go out to Big Lake on a weekend vacation, and you would go jet skiing and boating, and you had your cabin. If you lived in Big Lake, there was no cabin, there was no lake. You just lived in a shack in the woods, right? So I lived in a shack in the woods. We had this house out in Big Lake, and if you go there now, it's full of cars in the front yard. The next door neighbors are hillbillies. You have, people smoking pot, dealing drugs, doing whatever, cooking meth. That's the kind of neighborhood we lived in. And in Big Lake, it was almost a rule that your next door neighbor, if they had a trailer, it was almost obligatory for them to have at least 15 beat up cars in the backyard. Okay. They never drove them. There was no purpose apparently for them to be there, but they had 15 beat up cars in the backyard. Right. So I'm kind of describing this because that's the environment that I grew up in. Okay. So that was my mom's house. My dad's house, we lived in the town that's out in the city. We had an apartment, much nicer. Now, my dad was a handyman. And if you know my story, my mom and dad were married. They got divorced and remarried from each other 3 or 4 times. The very final time, my dad married my mom again, moved back out with us to the house in Big Lake, which he'd never been to before. And my dad was a handyman. He was a carpenter. He's a painter, right? So he knows how to fix things. He knows how to build things. And so when he walked in that house, within 2 months, he was looking at black mold growing in the ceilings. The house wasn't built up to code. The roof, if you guys are builders, instead of using insulation like you should, like fiberglass, they filled the roof they put tin, and then they use foam insulation. Okay. So they tin and foam insulation and then plywood boards, and they just made a little sandwich and stuck it in there. So what ended up happening is this foam insulation started molding. And as my dad started pulling it apart, he started finding more and more and more and more. And so my 7th grade summer, I spent my summer without a roof over my bedroom, because you can't live in a house with black mold because you'll get sick. Okay. So this is my 7th grade year. And the reason why I share that story is that house was not built to code. Okay. Alaska, if you think about the history of Alaska, where I grew up, it was settled in like the 1940s and 50s. So there wasn't a lot of code. There wasn't a lot of oversight. And so people would just throw up these random houses, random structures, and they weren't up to code. They weren't built correctly. And so now in modern times, when someone gets one of them, they find all that nastiness, right? And if you think about when something isn't built up to code, why is that? There's usually 3 reasons. The person building it doesn't know what they're doing. Okay, so that's reason number 1. The person building it does know what they're doing, but they're trying to go faster. They're trying to cut corners. That's reason number 2. Or they're trying to save money. Right? That's reason number 3. So either they don't know what they're doing, and so they build a terrible, nasty shack with mold in the ceilings, and we've got to tear the roof out, and the entire thing is just gross, right? Like in Big Lake, the houses, a lot of them are Tyvek painted, meaning they don't paint. They just leave the Tyvek plastic up. And so this is the kind of thing we're looking at. Or so they don't know they build that, or they're trying to cut corners and go faster. So they know that it's going to be ugly. They know it's not going to be safe to live in. They know it's probably going to be a problem down the road. But right now, they're just trying to get something done quickly, right? Or third, they're trying to save some money. They're trying to save money because spray foam insulation is cheaper than fiberglass, because Tyvek siding is cheaper than actually buying wood for your siding and painting it, right? Or because, putting your own electrical system together that probably could kill you if you touch the wrong wire is cheaper than hiring an electrician, right? And the reason why I share this is I know some of you guys watching, some of you girls watching, probably grew up with a similar experience, right? And as an adult, we can look back on it and laugh, but during it, you're like, this is normal, right? This is normal. That's where I lived in 7th grade. I didn't know anyone's house was any different. When I looked around, our house was nicer than some of the ones around it, because we didn't have, hang on, John Moss has a comment. We didn't have the cars, beat up in the driveway and stuff. John says they build like that because it's all three: survival, right? So a lot of times, they don't know what they're doing. They're trying to save time. They're trying to save money. They're just trying to get by and survive is what John is saying. That's correct. Right. And so basically, that's something where I looked around. I thought that was normal. I was like, no, we don't have cars in our driveway. My mom didn't have 15 cars. So that was like, above standard in the neighborhood. Our house was painted. The neighbor's house wasn't. We lived in like, it's not a home, but it wasn't a trailer. It was kind of this modular built out thing, nicer than a mobile home, nicer than a trailer. So I was kind of like, man, our house is not the same as everyone else's. And also it's kind of nicer. So this must be normal, right? Until I went to a friend's house and I realized that their houses weren't like that. They had nice houses, right? They didn't have their roof missing off their bedroom. As I started looking around and seeing what else was out there, I realized, man, we live in a podunk hillbilly trailer. Okay. And that's just what it was. And so I'm sharing this because that's how a lot of us live with our finances. John said it best. We're just trying to survive, right? We're just trying to we don't know what we're doing. We're trying to save time. We're trying to save money. We're not thinking long-term. We're looking around and comparing ourselves to the people that are worse off than us and saying, oh, I'm better than that person. I'm better than that person. At least I'm not in debt. At least I don't have this going on. At least I'm not divorced. At least I'm not, having a lawsuit. At least I file my taxes. And we're basically justifying why we're better off than the people that are worse than us. But what we're blind to is that there are people in life that are better than us over here, and we're not looking at them. Right? If we were to look at them, we'd see, wow, they have a lot more going on. They're saving more money than we are. They're paying less in taxes. They have an actual estate plan. They don't have debt. They have their insurances. They have all this stuff going on. Okay. And so this is what happens. And it's a funny example with, the house I grew up, but this is really what happens with our finances. And so tonight we're going to talk about the blueprints, right? Because when an inspector shows up to that house, he's not going to listen to, we were just trying to survive. He's not going to listen to, I didn't know. We were just trying to save some time. We were just trying to save some money. He's either checking the box saying you did it correctly and it's up to code, or he's checking the box and saying it's not. Okay. And the story at that point doesn't matter. And so tonight I'm kind of going to be the inspector, and this is going to be the blueprint and the check sheet that we're going to go through to say, okay, are we actually living with our finances in a way that's up to code, in a way that actually is survivable? Right? Like not the way John was mentioning of like, we're just trying to get by today. No, we're thinking about generational survival. Like, are my kids, are my grandkids going to be able to live in this financial house that I built? Or are they going to have to tear the roof off because in 7th grade, they got black mold above their roof? Justin says, believe it or not, black mold in a house is how we got started with our network marketing business. Justin, that's awesome. I knew we had some more in common. So guys, what we're going to talk about tonight is, the blueprint to financial freedom, right? So the very first part of this is we have to understand, what is the purpose of this blueprint? What are we actually building towards, right? What's the end goal? Whenever we're looking at following a plan, whenever we're looking at building our finance, we have to look at, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? Just like with the course, why am I watching the course tonight, right? The blueprint, what's the purpose? If we go to the very end, and I'm actually going to work our way backwards on this. If we go to the very end, the goal is to become financially independent. Right? Financially independent. If we look at that, financially independent, we describe that as passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes. Okay. PI greater than set, passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes. That means I don't have to trade time for money any longer. Right. So that's our goal that we're working up towards. And that's the reason why we're doing this. Now, what that means is, if my financial purpose is anything different, this is not the plan for me. If my goal is just to have a nice paid off house, this is not the plan for me, right? If my goal is to leverage myself with a bunch of real estate debt and try and scramble around and pretend I'm Robert Kiyosaki, this is not the plan for me, right? If my goal is to watch motivational videos of sales coaches and motivational speakers who talk about cash flow and they don't actually tell me how to get there, and I just want to watch and consume their stuff, this is not the plan for me, right? This is the plan for someone that actually wants to get here. They actually want passive income that exceeds their savings, expenses, and taxes, so that they don't have to trade time for money anymore. And they actually want to do something about it, right? Meaning we're actually going to tell you to do something. We're going to say, here's the steps, go do them. We're not going to say, get really motivated. Here's a bunch of esoteric and motivational and cool sounding stuff. Go figure it out. We're saying, no, you do exactly this, and you do it exactly this way, and in these exact steps and sequences. And then come talk to me when you're done. And so there's going to be some accountability there, and there's going to be some expectation there that might not be there if you're listening to a guru, right? Because at the end of the day, the guru is not going to be there to walk you through the steps. They're just there to say, cool things and motivational things. So before we're financially independent, right before that, we have to become what is called an accredited investor. Okay, right here, accredited investor. I'm going to shrink my pen down a little bit. An accredited investor. An accredited investor means that I have $1 million net worth, not including the value of my home. Okay, we've talked about this before. So this is right before becoming financially independent. So accredited $1 million net worth, meaning what I own minus what I owe, not including my home and not including my mortgage, comes out to a surplus of $1 million or more. That makes me accredited. When I'm accredited in the investing world, there is a curtain that gets pulled back, and all of these investment opportunities that were never available to me prior to being accredited, all of a sudden become available. Right? Meaning most people are buying stocks and bonds and mutual funds and ETFs and annuities and you name it, indexed universal life insurance, because that's the only crap they know about. The accredited investments, they're not, the non-accredited people, they're not allowed to be advertised to about them. They're not allowed to know about them. They're not allowed to be talked to about details and specifics until they prove they're accredited, right? So I want to get there because that's where the deals get greater. The returns are greater. The tax benefits are greater. The structuring is more like a true partnership. And so accredited happens right here. And then right after that, we become financially independent because the accredited deals give us that last boost. I tell people all the time, to be financially independent, I need to look at having probably a $2 to $3 million net worth. Right? On a $2 to $3 million net worth, if I can earn a 12% annual yield, that's paying me enough to cover for most families, my passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes. So that's the number I need to be thinking about. So accredited helps me go from 1 million to then doubling or tripling that number. Okay. So that's the step right before this. Now, this is really exciting. Let me zoom this in correctly. This is really exciting sounding. And it's one of those areas where we'll have people that hit us up on the phone, or they'll call in on the website, or they'll submit their information. And it's almost like, they're a little kid that just found out about sex. And they're like, can you tell me about the accredited deals? I think I might be accredited. And it's the same like fixation on it. We're not there yet. If I were to, let's say I could share with you the accredited deals, theoretically, and there was no rules against it, and there was no nothing, right? And you were allowed to know about them. Number one, most of us would not have enough money to do the deals. Number two, if we did, we'd be confused. We'd look at these and say, what does that even mean? How does this work? Right? And so it's like, like the middle school kid that can't wait to make out with a girl. And then the moment finally comes and he's like, I don't know what to do. I don't even know how to talk to a girl. I don't even know when they call me what to say when they pick up the phone. Right? And even if I did, I'm too nervous to actually do anything about it. So that's the same thing that happens. Is the reason why we have this undercut is because before we're accredited, all of the next things we're going to talk about get you in a position so that when you do have the net worth, you're educated, you have the foundation underneath of you, you've had the training, you've got the experience, you've got the background, and you're ready to actually do the deals. And it's not something that's overwhelming, confusing, too expensive, whatever it might be. Okay. Because what happens, and this is something that I know because I have personal experience, is if we throw someone into these early, it's going to cause problems for them because they're not educated. They don't know how it works. Now, all of a sudden I have an oil and gas deal, or I have an opportunity zone deal, or whatever it might be that's accredited only. And I've got to now figure out how to manage it. I've got to figure out the bookkeeping. I've got to figure out all of it. And it's my deal. So it's my responsibility, but I don't know anything about it. Right. And then I stop doing more deals and I never get to the 2 million. I never get to the 3 million because I fixate and I stop and I quit moving forward because I'm trying to make sense of this thing that I have because I got involved in it too early. Right. So don't put the carriage before the horse. Get accredited when you're accredited. Once you're there, we'll talk all about it. Right. But this idea of, trying to sneak by and get in early, like that's not a good idea. And if you do that, we catch it and then we can't do any more deals with you anyways, because you illegally did an accredited deal. Okay. So before accredited, right before that, what happens? Okay. Prior to accredited, there's something called a qualified investor, right? This is phase 4. A qualified investor. This is somebody that has freedom to invest in assets and shelters that will accelerate net worth progress toward becoming an accredited investor. So the goal of a sophisticated investor is which is prior to the qualified, is to just be able to start doing deals. Then we get to qualified. We've been doing deals. Now the goal is to multiply the net worth to become accredited. So if you're qualified, it means you have a $250,000 net worth, not including the value of your home. You've done deals before. You've got access to what's called a level 2 private placement, which means you've done 3 or 4 of the level 1s, the basic, the private lending. You've got that under your belt. We're ready to move into some more advanced stuff now. And this more advanced stuff is going to multiply your net worth so that you become accredited sooner, right? We want to start multiplying rather than adding. So what we're focused on here is we have things like foreign currency trading. We have private lending deals that offer higher yields than we might be used to. We have corporate funding where we're going to help you get corporate debt to invest. We have trade line leasing where you can actually lease out your credit lines to other people for passive income. These are all exciting things. Same concept as accredited though. If I've never done a deal, period, like I've never done a private lending deal, I've never done any sort of investment, and I see this and I'm like, I want to know about foreign currency. It's the same thing as the accredited. If you're not there yet, it's not going to be helpful because A, you probably won't have the money to get into the deal. And if you do, you're not going to understand it and it'll be bad for you if you do it soon, right? So the timing is key on this. Now, there's 2 things we're looking at for a qualified investor is multiplying the net worth through the investments and then reducing the taxes. So the second part here are tax reduction trusts, right? So on phase 4, we start looking at tax sheltered income. We look at, okay, can we set up a trust and shelter your income from taxes? There's probably 4 or 5 different types of trusts that do this, right? We're not going to dive into all of it tonight, but we basically set this up. And this is another thing that it sounds very exciting, right? But somebody that's like, hey, I'm going to set up a trust because I saw, Anderson Business Advisors on YouTube and they said it was a good idea. I'm going to do it. Okay, well, now you have a trust tax return. Okay, that's another $1,000 when you pay that to file your taxes. You have to have a trust management company. You have to determine the structure of the trust. What state is it going to be set up in? What type of trust is it going to be? Are you following the rules? Because if you're not, you can get slapped on the hand by the IRS and get penalties and pay taxes. And so it's another one of those things where it sounds really, really, really interesting. But if we skip steps and get there and we do it out of hand, then it's actually going to be harmful because now all of a sudden, we put $500,000 in a trust prematurely. Let's say it's that big of a number and it wasn't set up right. And now all of a sudden we have to pay taxes and penalties on $500,000. Boom, there went all of our investment capital. We're never going to become accredited now. Okay, so that's phase 4. Prior to this on phase 3, we have 3A and 3B. 3B is what we call the 40% rule. We'll talk about that in a second. 3A is we start doing these level 1 private placements. Okay, so someone that's on phase 3, generally they don't have passive income yet. Okay, so passive income means it's an investment opportunity that I put the money into and it pays me income that I do not trade any time for. Being a landlord is not passive income. Okay, managing a 4-plex where I live in a unit for free and rent the other 3 out, that's not passive income. Running a business is not passive income. Day trading stocks and Bitcoin is not passive income because I have to trade my time for all of those things. So the most passive form of income is lending. Why do you think when you do a real estate deal, the bank does not want to be your partner on the deal? They're not like, Avery, when you do this deal, we'll issue you the money if you make us 50% partner. No, they don't want to touch the deal. They don't want to deal with your tenants. They don't want to deal with your bookkeeping. They don't want to deal with you. They just want their interest payment because they don't have to trade any time for it because they realize as soon as they trade time for it, they're working for the same dollar twice, which should be a financial sin. Never work for the same dollar twice, right? When I work for $1, I take that dollar and I make it go produce for me. I'm not going to trade my time for that money again. I'm done with that. That's boom. It came in through the business. It came in through the job. Now it goes into an investment and that investment produces autonomously away from me without my time. And if I don't do it that way, what happens is I start accumulating more and more of these little projects and I start trading more and more of my time. And it actually pulls me off of the thing that produced the income in the first place. Right? I can't tell you how many times I see business owners, salespeople, even just salary employees where they get some money and they're like, oh, I'm going to go buy a real estate property. And now all of a sudden their sales drops or their business is plummeting or they can't work and they can't keep up with their job and their schedule because of this problem and this repair and this tenant issue and that tenant issue. And all of a sudden they're spending all this time on this project rental property and they're no longer producing the income to go buy another one. Okay, time after time after time that happens. It's not passive, guys. So I'm saying lending is the most passive form of income. So when we do these level one private placements, these are secured private lending deals where you're being the bank and we set them up so they're entry level, meaning there's not a lot of complexity. They're very basic. They're very simple. There's not a lot you need to know other than what's the valuation of the asset? What's the loan to value ratio? Can they service the debt? Who is managing it? What's their track record? Have they defaulted? All the types of questions a bank's going to ask you when you ask them for debt, right? Except you're the bank, so you're extending the loan out. So when you're doing these deals, the purpose is every time you get 50 grand, you're putting that into one of these deals. Every time you get 50 grand, you're putting it into one of these deals. And by getting that 50 grand put aside, you're now producing usually about $500 a month in passive income. So if you can get 3 or 4 or 5 of these deals paying you $500 a month in passive income, right? You're now making $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 a month in addition to your business income or your salary that you're able to save 100% of. That gets you to the position of saving 40% of your income much sooner, right? So when we get to 3B, we're not trying to skip to 4. No, we're going to hang out and we're going to do 3 or 4 or 5 deals until you're consistently saving 40% of your income. We want to see this 3 months in a row, right? 3 months in a row. Then we say, okay, great. We've done this. We've done 3, 4, 5 deals. You're now sophisticated by definition. You're saving 40% of your income as well. Let's jump into phase 4, right? So that's phase 3. Notice this isn't phase 1, right? We're going to still go ahead and talk about the next ones. Now, this is phase 2. Phase 2 happens obviously before phase 3. Phase 2 is kind of lengthy, but they're fast actions. They're not things that take a lot of time, right? So on phase 2, the purpose of this is to gain freedom from financial traps created by Wall Street, banks, and the government in order to never again become a financial victim, right? So think about this. If you're overpaying in, let's say, your 401k, you're contributing, let's say 3, 4, 5% of your income, and you're making 100 grand, just to be easy on the math. Let's say you're making 100 grand and you're contributing 5% of your income. That's $5,000 per year that you've been giving to Wall Street. They're going to keep it till you're 60. They're going to charge fees on it. Inflation is going to happen because of the banking system. And then the IRS is going to take their taxes out before you ever get any of that money upon the withdrawal, right? Who really won on that? The average retail mutual fund investor over the last 20 years after tax or after fees made about 3.88%, I believe. Okay, that's the after fee return, 3.88% per year. When you then factor in inflation, 5%, you're now negative. Okay, then you factor in taxes on top of that, which is going to be probably 25 to 40% of what you withdraw. You didn't actually make any money on the 401k, right? That makes this a trap. That's literally a mouse trap with some cheese on it for your money. Let's talk about banks, right? You have a car loan and a mortgage. Everyone is going to usually have a car loan and a mortgage. You might have student loans and you might have credit cards too on top of that, right? But everyone for sure is usually going to have a car loan and a mortgage, right? Your mortgage, you will pay on that for the rest of your life, right? Sure, your home appreciates and it has the value go up. You can't have any of that money though. Okay, a mortgage doesn't work that way. You pay the bank, on an amortization for the next 30 years, whatever you pay them is theirs. You don't get that money back ever again. Okay, so you're giving up your income for an asset that you're not even allowed to count towards your net worth, right? So it's an asset because technically that's what it's called. But when you look at, does this help me become wealthy? No, you can't even count it towards becoming an accredited investor. So it's not much of an asset. It actually costs you money. And so when you go into the banking system of amortized debt over a 30-year period, they're making money on money that wasn't theirs to begin with. They don't care about the rates, right? On a mortgage, people are like, oh, the rates are 3%. Do you really think the bank would be promoting that? Right? If you were getting a deal and the bank was losing, do you think they would be promoting that? Like, oh, rates are low, come into our office and get a mortgage loan. Do you really think they'd be like promoting something that they know they're losing on? No, they're not. So when they're promoting, oh, rates are super low, you should get in, then you should know it's not about the rates. Okay, it's not about the rates. It's about the income. They want a percentage of your income for the next 30 years, regardless of what the rate is. The rate is a mathematical factor used to amortize and lengthen the amount of time it takes you to repay your principal. By splitting principal and interest, every payment has less and less interest or less and less principal at the beginning of a loan. So it takes you longer and longer and longer to pay them back. Therefore, they get more of your income for a longer period of time. That's all banks care about. Not only that, it's not even their money that they're loaning you, it's yours. They're loaning you your own money, your grandma's money, your sister's money, your community's money, which were deposited like in good faith that money would grow. And instead they're loaning it out and making tons of money on it. So we want to get out of that system on phase 2. And then finally is the government, right? The government's going to get you through taxes, right? They're going to get you through income tax, and they're going to get you through probate and sales, or probate and estate tax, right? So income tax, every time I earn money, I've got to pay a percentage of that, right? Hey, Samson, wake up, buddy. My dog is barking down here. Income tax, I'm going to pay a percentage of my income every time I earn a check, right? And then a probate, when I have my assets, if I die and I don't have a trust, they go through probate. The court system takes a nice fat percentage out of it. And then if my net worth is high enough, the government has me pay an estate tax, usually about 40%. So just think about that. If I pay 40% of my income when I earn it, and then I invest that money and I do a good job of building a legacy and building assets, and then when I die, they're going to take another 40. That's 80%. Right? That's 80%. That's insane, guys. Right? So in this phase 2, here's what we're doing. Number 1, phase 2A, we're going for the sacred account gold. We're building up gold, right? And we're going to use that for a 20% down payment to either purchase or refinance out of a traditional mortgage on a property. So if I don't own a house yet, let's say I'm renting, right? And I'm on phase 0, I'm on phase 1. I should save 20% down payment for my house purchase in gold, right? I'm going to borrow against the gold. I'm going to use that to actually fund the down payment on my house. If I own a house already, then I want to be able to refinance that out with a home equity line of credit. We're going to talk about that means in a second. But basically, if I live in the house and I'm already, a homeowner, I've already got a mortgage, I want to take that gold loan and pay my mortgage down and then refinance myself out. So I've got the gold loan going on. I've got that's phase A, right? Phase B is my estate and legal, right? So this is me setting up a will, a living will, and a healthcare directive, and then also a long-term care protection plan, and then also a revocable living trust, right? So same thing I just mentioned. If we're on phase 2, let's say we build up all these assets, right? If I don't first put an estate plan in place, that means I'm at risk that when I pass away, those assets go through probate, right? Most of us don't know what probate is. Probate means that when I die, the court system, even if I have a will, the court system looks at my will, they take an inventory of my assets, and then they determine if my will is, legal and it's something they can distribute based on and it's valid. And they do basically a checks and balances, and then they go through and they distribute the assets to the appropriate party. That process on average takes up to 18 months. And between legal fees and taxes, it costs about 15% of my asset value. So let's say that I have, 100, not even 100, let's say $1 million. Let's say I have $1 million in my assets, right? Not super rich, not wealthy, but I've got $1 million in assets. I die, I pass away, right? And I say, hey, I want my kids and I want my grandkids and I want my church and I want my business to get these assets, right? Well, that's going to take 18 months before they get it. And by the time they get it, it's only going to be worth $850,000 because of the probate fees. So when we set this up, we're saying we're going to do this before we start acquiring assets, before we start buying investment deals, before we start doing private lending, before we start doing Forex deals. The reason being is we want to have this established so that we can title all of those assets to the trust, right? So that when I die, my trust owns everything. They're going to look in and they say, what does Jerry's will say? It says he doesn't own anything. The trust owns it all. It bypasses probate. It can immediately distribute it to the right people at the right time under the right circumstances. And it costs not $150,000. It might cost you $2,000 to set up a trust, right? Maybe $3,000, right? So this system is being proactive and thinking about this ahead of time. Same thing with the long-term care, right? Long-term care means that my assets are going to be covered. If I end up in a nursing home, it's not going to liquidate my assets and it's not going to, reduce my family's financial freedom because I end up in a position where I need in-home care or I need nursing care. Phase 2C is the HELOC, right? So the idea of the HELOC, and I'm gonna go pretty quick on this because I don't want to run out of time. The HELOC basically is mimicking how banks lend to each other, right? So there's what's called an amortized loan, which means I pay back principal and interest at a predetermined split, a predetermined ratio of each. Banks don't do that when they borrow money themselves. When a bank borrows money, they do an interest-only loan, right? So they're going to say, hey, we're going to borrow, $10 million and we're going to pay 4% interest only, and it's going to be on a 10-year term, right? That's an example. And so the payment on that is much, much lower if it was, hey, we've got to pay back the $10 million and also the 4% interest over the 10-year period. Then the payment is giant, right? But the banks don't do that. They pay 4% interest only, 5% interest only. And then they worry about refinancing or funding the balloon payment of the debt on the back end later. So we're going to do that with your mortgage. We're going to basically refinance you out of a traditional mortgage, drop your housing payment down to about a third of what it is today, so that you're not paying principal back to the bank. You're not giving them that amortized payment. You're keeping more of it. You're reducing your interest and reducing your taxes and your housing payment, right? All of this stuff hacks away at that 40% savings rule, right? So if we think about, we're no longer paying much towards housing. We're prior to phase two, we're completely out of debt, right? And now our housing payment is 300% less than what it used to be. We can save a lot more income this way. And then finally, 2D is tax planning. Okay, tax reduction planning. We have a client that we just did tax planning for. I think he paid us $7 or $8 grand in fees to do tax planning. And then we got him back $7 or $8 grand. That's 100% return. Like, he made exactly that back in the first year. We're going to continue doing the same strategy. And every year that $8 grand return is going to be there plus more, because we're always going to be adding to it. Right. So this tax planning thing is, how do we reduce your income tax proactively by looking at what is your tax strategy? What are you paying now? And then how can we implement the tax code to reduce your taxes down? Okay. If we can get you down to zero, great. Right. This is a particular case where the guy was paying tens of thousands in taxes prior to working with us. And then he gets about 10 grand back for this year. That's nice. Right. But here's the thing is, if we take 8 grand and we say, okay, I'm going to invest 8 grand and we try and skip phase two, we're like, let's go straight to phase three. Let's put this in a private lending deal. And we have $8,000. $8,000 is not enough money to do a private lending deal with. You need at least 50, but let's say you could do it with $8,000. Okay. What is 12% of $8,000? That's $80 a month. Right. So you look at $80 a month, that's not very much money. It's nothing to snuff your nose up. A 12% return is great. But I'm saying you put 8 grand towards an investment that's going to pay you 12%, right? $80 a month, or you put 8 grand towards tax planning that's going to pay you 8 grand. Which would you rather have, 8 grand plus 8 grand or 8 grand plus $80 a month? Right. It's not even a contest. And so a lot of times this idea of, I want to skip ahead, I want to get to the next phase, I want to save time, I want to save money, actually causes us to do the opposite. Because somebody that just jumps into the investing, like, screw the tax planning, right? Or they jump into the investing and they're like, forget about the HELOC. I don't want that. It doesn't make sense. Okay, well, if I can reduce your housing payment by 300%, let's say you're paying $6,000 a month on a really nice property. That means now you're going to pay 2. Which means I just saved you $4,000 a month, right? $4,000 a month, you would have to have, I believe, $400,000 invested at 12% in order to make 4 grand a month. I'm saying you could do that with $5,000 in closing costs on a house you already own. If you don't own it, put 20% down, right? 20% down on that home, you pay a couple hundred grand, still less than $400,000. And that's going to pay you that for the next 10, 20, 30 years, that saving and interest. That deal, that's only going to pay you that for 5 years, right? So I'm not saying don't invest, and investing is not worth it. I'm saying there are things that are better off being done sooner, because they give you a bigger bang for your buck. They give you a higher cash on cash return. They give you a higher return on investment, right? The trust is an example of one that you might not see that, but check this out. If you don't do the trust before you do all the investing, one of the steps of setting up a trust is funding it. Funding it means that I have to go and take every account, every investment, everything that I own that's a financial asset, and I've got to change the beneficiary to my trust, right? So we want to have the trust first, because what happens is, let's say you skip that step. Then I don't need to do phase two. I'm just going to jump right into the deals. I want to do the deals. I want the cash flow. I want the passive income. I watch too much Robert Kiyosaki and too much Grant Cardone, right? So you just jump right into phase three. And then you get 10 or 15 or 20 real estate deals. Okay. Well, then you're like, oh, shoot, I've got a bunch of deals. I should really set up a trust. Okay. And now you're going back to phase two and you're looking at this trust and you set it up. Well, guess what? Now you're backlogged on changing the beneficiaries on 20 different transactions. Do you know how much time and money that's going to take for you to go change 20 different transactions and go to the escrow company or the title company or whoever it is that's doing that investment or that property and ask them, hey, can you change the title and can you change the beneficiary to my trust? Most people aren't going to do it. What you're going to do is you're going to get the list and see, wow, that's a lot that I have to do. I'm not going to do it. Well, now you own a trust that's not funded, which means it's completely invalid. It doesn't do anything for you because it doesn't actually receive your assets, right? So we're telling you set it up on phase 2B, because that's before you start getting into the deals. If you already have the trust set up, now when you're doing deals, you just from the get-go fund the trust. Who's your beneficiary? My trust is. Here's the EIN. Here's the information. Boom, it's done. Free takes you the same time it was going to take you to do the deal and name yourself as the beneficiary or to name your wife or whoever you were going to name, right? But now we do the trust. So all of this is there for a reason. I think phase 2 is the one that people get through 0 and they get through 1 and they're like, man, am I ready to invest yet? But I'm ready to be there. So phase 2 is the one where like, oh man, another one. And it really is phase 2 being done with phase 3, right? Like in tandem prior to, makes phase 3 even better. Because now you have more money that you're saving and you have more deals you can do faster. So it's a classic scenario of take one step back to take 2 steps forward. Okay, so check this out. Prior to phase 2, we're on phase 1, which is solvency. We're building up 6 months of reserves in our sacred account with our life insurance. We're getting our disability insurance coverage in place, long-term disability coverage. These are just like things that you should do because they're smart, right? Like having 6 months of reserves. If I can't afford to do that, I probably can't afford to put 50 grand into an investment, right? If I can't afford to spend 100 or 200 bucks or whatever it might be on disability insurance so that if I get disabled, my plan's not totally foiled, right? Then I probably don't need to be spending money on investments and tax planning yet, right? Like these are very basic things that should be done. If you ask any person, they're going to tell you that's a good idea. You should do that, right? But just like eating right is a good idea, and going to the gym is a good idea, and reading books is a good idea, and spending time with our families instead of being on our phones is a good idea, and going to church is a good idea. We all know they're good ideas. Most of us don't do them, right? But this is the thing where, again, if we're looking at we're building a financial house, is this thing up to code? If I haven't done this and I haven't done this, no, it's not up to code. And we're not going to let you invest, and we're not going to offer you tax planning, and we're not going to show you how to do a RIM loan because it's like, bro, you don't even have 6 months in reserves. You don't even have disability insurance in place. Like those are such basic, simple things where it's the equivalent of somebody saying, can I drive yet? And like your kid, and they can't even clean their room. And it's like, no, you can't drive yet. You can't make your bed. I'm not going to give you keys to a car until you be responsible for your life and others if you can't make your own bed, right? Like they're not related, but they are because it's a responsibility thing. It's just a simple right thing to do. So that's phase 1. Prior to phase 1, we have phase 0, right? Phase 0 is probably the most difficult phase because it takes care of a lot of different things. The first thing it takes care of is financial illiteracy, right? So we have this program called Wealth Dynamics University. I put it together to share with you what I've learned over the last 10 years of studying finances so that you can become financially literate, top 1% level. Right? So when we look at this phase 0, financial illiteracy, some of us, that means we don't know anything about anything. I've had people ask me, Jerry, what's an interest rate? Right? You can Google it, right? Like if you don't know what interest rate is, you can Google it, you can go on Investopedia. But what that tells me is if I don't know what an interest rate is, like I'm way back on financial literacy. Like it's going to take me a lot of time just to get up to the point of being at like a break even. Okay, I know what an interest rate is. And now I can start learning about more complex things, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is there's people that will meet that they think they're financially literate, but they're actually misinformed, right? Like I was when I was a financial advisor. I thought I was financially literate. I thought I knew all of this stuff. I thought I was intelligent. And then I started looking at my results versus the results of those around me that were doing this kind of stuff. And I saw, wow, they're way ahead of me than I ever imagined. Like they're doing stuff that I didn't even know existed. So I had to unlearn a bunch of stuff. And then I had to learn the new stuff. And so that was something that took time. And then there's some of us that we haven't gotten too jacked up. We've paid attention. We spent some time learning about money. We don't have a bunch of false information, but we still need to be learning, right? And so this financial literacy thing is from the get-go. We're saying, hey, before anything, learn, right? Spend time, spend 10 minutes a day. We don't ask that you spend hours a day. You're not going to college. You certainly can if you want to. We're telling you 10 minutes. While you're on the toilet, watch a Wealth Dynamics University video. Right? Like while you're sipping your coffee, read an article real quick. Like it's nothing crazy that we're asking you to do. But if you don't do this, then the trust isn't going to make sense. And the tax planning is not going to make sense. And the investments aren't going to make sense. And all of the stuff that you aspire to do, isn't going to make sense because you don't know how to do it. There's know-how behind it. And this is not a financial advisor where you hand us your assets and you say, I'll check in with you when I'm 60. Hopefully I can retire. No, you're self-directing this. We expect you to be involved. It's your money. It's personal finance. It's not group finance. It's not delegated finance. It's not autopilot finance. It's personal. So you have to manage your own finances, and we're going to teach you how to do that. So the financial literacy is big. The purge helps you with your income and expenses. First point is solvency: earn more than you spend, right? Earn more than you spend. So this is a program that helps you do that. Then we have our precious metal subscriptions. If you're not saving in real money, it's going to be hard for us to have you get, why do I need to have 20% of my home payment in gold, right? That's not going to be a concept where you're like, oh, that makes sense, because you're still caught up thinking that the US dollar is money. You don't know the difference between money and currency theoretically, and then practically you've never owned real money instead of currency, right? And so this is an undercut of, okay, you're going to start subscribing and getting real money every month so that you know the difference. Theoretically, there's actually a course on that. And then practically, you've actually held $1 and a brick of gold. One of them is paper. One of them is shiny metal, and it actually has real value, right? Or maybe it's not even paper, it's a digit. One of them is an invisible object that you can't actually explain what it is. You just know it's there versus a real object. And when you have both of those, you get comparable reality on the two. Okay. And then finally, we get into, okay, let's help you get out of debt, right? Some people I talk to have no debt. Great. We can skip that step. Some people, they have hundreds of thousands, some have tens of thousands, right? And so when we go into debt, we're looking at, okay, we're getting out of debt. We actually have to go get caught up on probably years worth of expenses that we put out there without having the income. Debt is backlog. I spent money that I didn't actually have. It doesn't just magically go away now because I want to be out of debt. No, I have to go pay all of those things that I spent the money on, right? Like in a business, it's like I took money from a customer and never delivered the service. And I did that for years. And now all of these angry customers are like, hey, we paid you this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and you didn't give any of us this stuff. Well, I'm going to have trouble building a future business because I'm servicing 4, 5, 10 years worth of customers that I never gave them what they paid for. Right? That sucks, but it happened and you got to do it. Right? So if you're in debt, that's a phase that might take 6 months. It might take 12 months. It might take 24 months, whatever it might take. That's the amount of time that you're going back and repaying money that you spent that you didn't have. Right? It's not unfair. It's not poor me. You spent 24 months worth of income you didn't have. That's why that debt exists. You spent 10 years worth of income you didn't have. That's why that debt exists. So if you don't repay it, it's never going to go away. And we're not going to help you do other stuff till it is repaid. Okay. So that's the debt aspect. And then finally, we get into credit, right? Credit is the very final step of phase 0, right? Credit is not credit repair, meaning like, oh, I have a ding on my credit and I need to fix it. That's an aspect of it. But we're telling you is that on phase 4, you're going to lease your trade lines. You're going to take your credit lines that you're not going to use at that point. You're going to lease them out to other people for passive income. You can't do that if we don't do phase 0F, right? On phase 3B, when you're in the 40% club and you get it, like our advanced banking services and cashback cards, you're not going to qualify for those if you didn't do 0F. On phase 4, when you start trying to get corporate credit, a lot of your corporate credit, they're going to ask you to personally guarantee. They're not going to take you on a personal guarantee basis if you didn't do 0F. So credit is made up of how much debt do I have, right? How much credit is available? And then how many good things do I have on my credit versus how many bad things do I have on my credit? It's no different than a budget and assets and liabilities, right? Do I have more good than I have bad? A lot of people, they have maybe some bad things we have to remove. We've got to dispute and take things off. And then there's people that they just don't have enough good things. So we have to go through and strategically add good items on their credit profile so that the report goes up and the score reflects higher so that they can qualify for these things down the road. Okay. This is one that we start building up on phase 0F before we get into phase 1. Right? So all of this stuff, I know we covered a lot tonight. All of this stuff is there for a reason. This is not, hey, I have 50 grand in a life insurance policy. Can I do a deal now? There's a lot more to it than that. It's not, hey, I've got money. Can I put up a self-directed solo 401k and fund it? No, we have more we've got to do. At the end of this, I want you to be financially independent. And I want you to be organized and I want you to understand what you have. And I want you to be able to pass that on to whoever your legacy is, whether that's your kids or your church or your business, and be able to say, hey, look, this is what I have. Here's how it works. When I'm no longer around, you're going to take over and here's how you're going to work it. I can't teach someone else how to work it if I don't know how to work it myself. Right. So guys, that's what I have for you tonight. What I want to do is I want to open this up for some questions. This is something, again, that I want you to think with application. Right. So if you're a client, like, how do I apply this? Right. What phase am I on? Which one did I just finish? Which one's next? Those are my big three questions. This is something we can help with. If you're not a client, what does this mean for me? How do I get started? What's my next step? Why do I have to go through this? Where do I go? Those are the things you should be thinking right now. Okay. So let me answer some questions on Facebook. It's good to see everyone come out tonight. Jazwan, good to see you. Justin, good to see you. Justin said, I just had my financial blueprint review this morning with Nano. Now I have my next 3 financial targets set. That's awesome. Evo, good to see you. Becky, good to see you here tonight. Josiah says, just finished the financial blueprint book, then heard Mike Tyson promoting some of the strategies presented in a few days later. Very cool. These are the strategies that the 1% are doing. Yeah. And guys, Josiah is right. I've never invested with Mike Tyson. I don't know that I would, but one thing you'll notice is when you become accredited and you start spending time with accredited people, it will be uncanny how identical what they talk about, what they invest in is exactly what we're telling you to do. Like, you'll be like, wow, this exactly was what Jerry said. Like, this is the entire time. This is what he's been telling us. So you'll see that in real life as Josiah experienced. Sean said, definitely getting your Florida tan going. I'm getting the tan and also the sun bleached hair, which I don't mind. Living in Alaska for 20 years, I think I might have earned that. Let's see. We have a comment from Evo, Jessica Landa. Mutual funds have broker fees, tax costs, and inflation, and reduces the investment return from 12% to the non-guaranteed return of 3% or less. Check this video out. Very true. By the way, guys, there's no mutual fund that actually earns 12%. Like you might during a period, but when you look at the annualized actual net return, it's not 12%. You might get 8, right? Like before fees and taxes and inflation and everything. But you look at, there's a report from Dalbar, DALBAR. They're not even a mutual fund company. They're a rating agency that they work with mutual funds. And then when they do every year, they do a 20-year look back and they look at what did the average investor actually make? And it was 3.88% a year, which is a far cry from 12, right? Like that's 4 times less. That's a big deal. So exactly what Evo's pointing out. Todd, good to see you. Bob, good to see you. Becky said the bullion course was so eye-opening. So you guys might not know this, Becky, the videos at the end, if you get to the very end, those videos were what made me quit being a financial advisor. I watched those 4 or 5 videos. I was sick to my stomach for days. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. At the time I was selling mutual funds, stocks, bonds, retirement accounts. I had just watched The Big Short. I had just read The Creature from Jekyll Island and watched that video set within the series of about 6 weeks. Right. So that was what actually made me quit being a financial advisor and give that business away. Very powerful information. Justin says there are a lot of things I really like being about being a Wealth DynamX client. Honestly, the blueprint is one of my favorite things that I have as a client. It is great to see where you are, where you are going, and be able to see the progress along the way. A great tool indeed. That's awesome. Becky says, I couldn't agree more. The thought and detail that went into planning this is amazing. So happy to be on the track that is going somewhere successfully. The blueprint reminds me of how each step leads to greater things. That's awesome. That's exactly what it is. And before the blueprint, guys, like we had a lot of guesswork, right? Like some of my clients are like real OG, like Sean King. If he's still watching, Sean King sat with me in a janitor closet in my office because that's what my office was at the time, was a janitor closet. And we didn't have the blueprint organized. So I was trying to explain to him on like paper and pencil, like drawing pictures and stuff. And so Sean has a real life experience of like, okay, this is what it was like before the blueprint. This is what we have now. And what you guys have now is just ridiculously better. We're cloud-based, so you don't meet with me in an office, but at least it's not a janitor's office. Okay, let's see what we have on Zoom here. I think we have a couple people that met with me in the janitor's office. That was one of those moments too, where I was just like, just don't say anything about it and they won't either. This is totally normal. Okay. John Moss says cars are poor man's assets. That's very true. He says, I grew up in Wasilla just like you did. John probably saw Wasilla like a totally different Wasilla than I had when I was growing up. We moved into Alaska in 98, John. And so I grew up in Palmer, Wasilla, and then Big Lake. Avery has a question. Let me bring Avery on live here. All right, we're live with Avery. How are you tonight, Avery?
Doing well, Jerry. How about yourself?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. What's your question tonight?
Simple question this evening, since you started from the very end to the beginning. Uncertain if you're able to share exactly what it is. My question was just, what is an opportunity zone type of deal?
Yeah, so I can give you kind of a general answer on that. So an opportunity zone is basically it's a piece of tax legislature that says if you invest in certain areas of the United States, typically lower income or economically depressed areas, you actually can defer capital gains. Right. And so what that means is, let's say that I have, a investment like a Forex deal or a gold deal, and it's appreciated at a great deal. I'm going to sell it. There's going to be a gain in an opportunity zone. If I sell it, but then I immediately buy into the opportunity zone, all of the capital gains taxes are deferred. And if I keep it for 10 years, they get wiped out entirely, meaning I never have to pay taxes on it. Right. So the idea would be, you guys have heard like Biden talking about getting rid of 1031 exchanges and different things that get rid of capital gains tax. The opportunity zone is one that's been here for a couple of years. It's got a time limit. So I think they're good until 2027, and then they start phasing out if they don't get extended. But right now it's something that if you're accredited, you could literally put money into gold. The gold could, literally multiply by 10 times. And then you'd be like, great, I'm going to sell the gold now and just buy into this opportunity zone and pay no taxes on it. So without getting into great detail, that's what an opportunity zone is, Avery. You can probably look that up on Investopedia as well and learn a little bit more detail. Tamara has a question. I think she also said not to put her on live. That's fine. Let me answer her question just with reading. Good thing for reading. Tamara says, to get rid of debt, if I'm using the debt program company, should I instead take all of the money I'm saving and just pay off the debt in full and cancel the debt program? I can pay the debts off faster than 36 months that was offered. It will cost me more. It will delay my investment, which I don't mind, but it won't hurt my credit. Once my sacred account is fully set up, I may be able to do more halfway. So you're thinking along the right track. So Tamara, you would keep the debt program, but let's say you get accepted into the program for 36 months. That's based on the minimum, right? So when you get into our debt validation program or our debt assumption program, it basically makes it to where you've only got to pay 45% of what you owe. So if you owe 100 grand, you're getting it negotiated down to about 45,000. Now, the program will say, let's pay that over 36 months over equal payments. You can just pay it off early, right? So if you're like, hey, I've got 45 grand now, you can just pay that right now. Boom, the debt's gone. And then with the credit, that's something we just go through the credit DynamX program and fix it, right? So we go through and we dispute the negative items, we add positive items, we build your credit profile back up. That really only takes usually about 6 to 12 months in most cases. And so it's not a huge sacrifice to say, hey, my credit is going to maybe get hit for a period of 6 months or a year or 2 years, but I'm going to save. In this case, that would be 55 grand in principal, and probably double that, probably 100,000 if I include what I was going to pay in interest. I'm only paying 45 grand now, and then I'm out of debt in 12 months or 6 months or whatever it might be. So you would keep it, and then basically we would just pay it off early, repair your credit, and then move you into the next phase. So you'd be there faster still. Good question. Nano said, I watched those videos and got depressed. That was noticeable. I showed Nano those videos, and then I instantly was like, this was a mistake. But I'm glad I showed it to Nano. He stuck out with it. We have a question here from Sharon. She says, how do I access those videos? So that is something included in Wealth Dynamics University. So Sharon, if you'd like to get access to those, reach out to Nano Aquino. He can get you set up with a membership to Wealth Dynamics University. We have a month-to-month membership. If you want to get on a longer-term deal, you can do that too. So Nano, connect with Sharon on that. See if you can get her some information on the program. Oh, Tamara had another question. Let me see if I can find it. Nano has one. I'll hit that in a second. Tamara's question. Okay, so Tamara says, what if someone is able to start saving 40% of income, actually 65% prior to taxes and prior to investing? does 40% savings qualify the client for the tax planning or tax what if, or help us to avoid paying 30% of our income? I assume that would have to include some sort of side business. So if you're saving 65% of your income, Tamara, what I would do is I would throw that towards the debt, right? So when you look at there's residual expense and one-time expense, right? So when you look at debt, if we pay off debt, that's a residual expense that we're saving because that debt is going to occur every year. If we pay it off once, it's gone forever, right? With taxes, while tax planning is good, it's a one-time saving, right? So if I do X, Y, and Z this year for taxes and it reduces my tax bill, that only happens this year. And then I've got to do that again next year and again next year. And so it's a pay to play kind of system. Whereas with the debt, I pay it off one time and then I experience the savings forever, which is a exponential return, if you will. So if you've got that much money that you're saving, we wanted to accelerate your debt. So you'd still go through the program that we have you in. You just pay extra towards the debt, get it paid off sooner. Then you jump into phase one sooner. Then we jump into phase two sooner. We get into the tax planning sooner. So it all kind of builds upon itself like a domino effect. And we flick that first domino, which is knock out the debt, get the residual savings. And then very quickly after that, we're doing tax planning. Good question from Tamara. Let's see. It looks like Nano has a question. Let me bring Nano on live here and answer his question. Nano is...
Hey, Jerry.
Hey, Nano, how you doing?
You're great, man. You?
I'm good. How are you doing? Or I already asked you that. What is your question?
Yeah, for sure. So what would you say to those people who are married and perhaps only have one sacred account and one sacred account goal, right? That maybe they just think they only need one for the household instead of, one for each person.
Yeah, that's a good question. So for someone that is married, basically you have to look at, there are certain things that are household, right? Like household, like for savings, 6 months reserves, that's for the entire household. If you have 6 months in one sacred account, that covers the whole household, right? But there's certain things that aren't, like death benefit, right? So if I die, only my death benefit pays out, right? Like Lexi's death benefit doesn't pay out to her family if I die, it only pays out if she dies, right? And so with that being said, there are certain things where you have to look at the individuals and say, okay, this person needs one, this person needs one. For example, having, life insurance or having long-term disability insurance or having long-term care insurance or having, a will or certain things that, the household doesn't suffice because it's not looked at that way. Right? Like versus like something like taxes, like definitely household taxes, the IRS looks at the whole household. Of course, it's a bigger pie. They can steal more money. That's not something that we have to look at. Okay, what do I have and what does she have? Right? But if it's like, hey, my sacred account, I need one and she needs one. Disability insurance, I need it and she needs it. Long-term care insurance, I need it and she needs it. Right? The will, I need one, she needs one. And so there's not a scenario where the insurance company or the probate court or whoever it is that we're dealing with on those particular items is going to look at Jerry and say, because Jerry has it, it also counts for Lexi or vice versa. Right. So you kind of have to think about it like within a marriage, within a family, every person still has their own blueprint steps. Even though you might have household milestones, like the household hit, their savings goal, the household hit their tax reduction goal, the household hit their investment goal, right? But I still have my personal blueprint. I have my own credit score. It doesn't involve Lexi. So I have to do my own credit. She has to do her own credit. That's a great example, right? We might have 6 months of reserves. We might have passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes. But if she can't qualify for, loans or whatever, or corporate debt or credit leasing, because she's got a poor credit score because I did household instead of individuals, she's not actually financially free in that scenario because she's missing that component. So you have to kind of look at it that way. Certain things, like I said, are going to be household. Certain things are going to be individual. So things like, Wealth Dynamics University, both spouses should be doing that. That's another example. I can't know things for Lexi. Lexi can't know things for me. Like we haven't figured out how to link the information I know into her brain yet. And so we both need to study. We both need to have our own life insurance. We both need to have our own disability insurance. So that's what my answer would be to that question. I hope that answers that, Nano. Let me just make sure we didn't miss any other questions. AJ says, great breakdown tonight. That's awesome. Thank you, AJ. Glad you enjoyed it. Let me see if we have any other questions. Tamara asks, should I wait to set up my sacred account, then put my money there, then borrow to pay myself off from the debt? Exactly that. Yeah. So Tamara, what you would do is, let's say just easy numbers. Let's say you have 100 grand, you enroll it in the program, and it's now only 45. You want to fund your sacred account and get 45 grand in there so that you can pay the debt off all at once. Right. And what that does is now that 45 grand is going to grow forever. You now get the future value of that money versus me saying, okay, I've got 45 grand cash. Let me pay off the debt. Great. Now I'm out of debt, but I also will never see that 45 grand again, or any of the interest or the income it could have produced for me. So you definitely do want to get the sacred account set up and funded first. And in the meantime, you just make the agreed upon payments in the debt program. Once you have the time, once you have the money set aside, you then put that into the sacred account. Boom, we pay off the rest of the debt in one fell swoop. Nano's right on the blueprint. Even the kids have their own blueprint step. Granted, they might not do all of them right away because they're kids, but they still do have their own step, their own phases. All right, guys, I think that covers it for questions. What I want to do before we wrap up is, if you watch this tonight, if you watch the replay and you're like, okay, great, how do I implement this? Get a copy of Blueprint to Financial Freedom. This is my book. I wrote this last year. Actually, today, last year was when I started writing this book. So 1 year anniversary for starting the book. Go to jerryfetta.com/B2F. That's the letter B, the number 2, the letter F. Get a copy of this, read it from cover to cover. Okay. And then jump into either applying it yourself. Everything is there where you could, right? Or getting in contact with my team and saying, hey, great, I'm ready to start. Where do I go now? So that's what I want to go over with you before we wrap up. Again, that's jerryfetta.com/B2F. Make sure you share this if it helped you. We will see you guys again next week, same time. Have a great weekend.